Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Iron Pony, and I wanted to make this my first video just to do a little expose on a model I've had finished for a while now. I believe I wrapped it up last August, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, I posted this to Reddit, and it got some really amazing responses, and I'm still super happy with it, so I wanted to kind of share it with you, just walk you through what it is and the process behind making it. So this model started life as a completely stock, fresh from the 1960s Balboa brass Jupiter as part of the Golden Spike set. So yes, I also do have the 119, and I'm planning to do that down the road. That's not my highest priority right now because A, it's expensive, B, brass locomotives are especially time consuming. So that's kind of on the back burner and still in the planning stages. So let's focus on what we do have, and that is the Central Pacific Jupiter right here. So the Jupiter was always a huge favorite of mine, and when Lionel in 2019 released their initial renderings of the Jupiter in the newly researched paint scheme, I was totally enamored, but of course I don't really do O scale. So this sort of weighed heavy on my mind. I did have a new tooling 440 that was supposed to be Jupiter by Bachmann, but I think anyone who knows anything about the subject knows that it totally is not that at all. So I started by initially making 3D printed details to make that look more like Jupiter. Didn't really work out for me in the end. I do have old pictures of that, and I can put some up now so you just kind of get an idea what I was working with. Anyway, I sort of took a leap of faith about a year ago in April when I went ahead and bought the Balboa Golden Spike set. For the record, my 119 that came in the set is damaged, and I'm still looking for good ways to fix that before I really dig into the meat of the project. So this locomotive is running a motor from Northwest Shortline. I couldn't tell you the model off the top of my head. It's the really tiny one. Otherwise, it's using the original drive gear, and it has a Tsunami to TSU 1100 decoder hardwired in there. So it features a slew of different paints from all sorts of manufacturers, which I'll get into a little more detail when I go to the progress photos. But otherwise, it's got custom-made decals by me, which are a combination of references from John Ott's renderings as well as Trainboy 01's models for Train Simulator. Without any further ado, let me show you a little bit of running. My biggest gripe with the stock Balboa models was that a lot of the castings are weirdly kind of stretched. The first thing I knew I was going to do when I saw this model was fix the location of the check valve. And this is my first brass project I ever did. I started one a long time ago but never finished it. So just kind of keep that in mind as a lot of dumb stuff happens that I do. But yeah, this was my first time ever soldering on brass. So don't mind the Instagram text. That's going to appear in a couple of these because that's where I documented all of this originally. Anyway, this shows a couple of the first things I did. The first thing was I put the screen from a 3D print I got on Shapeways for my original Bachmann Jupiter into the stack because Balboa got it super wrong. I added some 3D printed details, including some Stevenson valve gear to give the underframe a little more texture, as well as boiler saddles, which you really can't see super well in any of the photos. I also added some of the pipes you find on the real Jupiter. I excluded most things to do with the crosshead, though, just because it wasn't super feasible without damaging the castings or hindering running. So that's kind of a shame. I might find some way to add just like a little illusion of having that somewhere down the road, but I don't want to touch this model for now. Um, but you can also see I got some cylinder cocks from Wiseman Backshop that I installed into the cylinders at a bit of an angle just because I didn't want them to short out against the pilot truck. This picture illustrates some of those things I did a little better. The clear green stuff is going to be the 3D prints, and the shiny wire and new solder is where I put on some new pipes to better get the character of the engine. And you also may notice the front of the domes, the front of the cab, they look a little rough and gritty, and that is a problem that still haunts this model to this day because I didn't think that through. Here we have the model after its original coat of primer, as well as some Alclad gloss black, because I figured that would give some of the metallic parts of a model a more deep texture. I did, before this, end up adding Micromark rivet decals, but I was dumb and I put them over the black, which made it super hard to see if they were ready or not, and I didn't put enough layers of decal solvent, so you might see some kind of not great looking rivets on the model, and that's why. So here we have the Balboa shell next to my original Bachmann shell I was talking a little bit about earlier. This just demonstrates when I first got down the new Vallejo metallic colors to get some of the boiler, and I really love these colors because not only do they airbrush on super convincingly, but you can actually brush paint them on too. All of the boiler bands were brushed on as well as the handrails. I actually end up going back and putting a dark acrylic wash over the actual boiler surfaces as well as the smokestack to kind of give it a more worn and darker look to contrast the Russia iron a little bit better. I wanted to leave this little tidbit intact because it's funny, Instagram text and all. I didn't really know what I was going to do for the plug of the locomotive, and this is how it started, and it's terrible, and it's just humorous that I thought that would actually work. So here we have the model with all of those Vallejo metallic colors on, and you can actually see the darker wash I was talking about. You can't really see it down in the firebox yet, but definitely on the smoke box itself, I think that illustrates that a little better. So this is actually one of my favorite techniques to do, and it's a total must-know for any 19th century modelers. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to put down an acrylic base, and then you're going to get some oil paint of what you want the wood grain color to be. And it's kind of a balance between letting it dry and thinning it out, where you'll basically just build it up in a couple layers and get a nice wood grain effect. So we got a couple points of interest in this photo. You can see the tender shell in the background, and it's been painted with, what was it, True Color acrylic paints. They're super weird, but they have some really nice texture and color to them. I I don't want to say I love them because they're so much trouble to put on, but they have a nice finish if you can get it on right and you kind of know how they work. Anyway, this is also my first DCC hardwire install, and totally stupid of me to do that in a brass locomotive. But yeah, I digress. Now, what I actually have under there now is a plug that comes out the back of the tender, and it sort of mates to the locomotive, which has a super long plug protruding out the back when it's not plugged in. But yeah, that is what the decoder and all of its accessories look like inside of the tender. And here's what the engine looked like after I got most of the main colors on. As you can see, the pilot and the headlight mount and the sand dome still aren't quite painted yet, but I got some of the details on the underframe and frame sort of painted and worked out. And you can see on the rear tender truck, I actually started lining it there. I was super afraid to do it, and I didn't think I was originally going to do it at all, but I totally just freehanded most of it. And to go into a little more depth, my partner, bless their heart, actually helped me with a bunch of the lining because they're a bit of a traditional artist. I know you might not consider modeling art, but I think it is, and together I think we made a really beautiful model. So I'm not going to bother showing the video because it's just the poor thing spinning in place, but this was sort of what the motor installation looked like. This is when I first got it running and all wired up. I was super happy that it actually worked because I totally didn't expect it to at all, in all honesty. So here we have a lot more of the lining done, as well as the headlight on and painted. Now, what we actually didn't have done in this picture was the pilot lining because we were both really scared to do that since it's so intricate. They actually even painted the tiny little arrowheads with the dots in the middle and all, which I'm super happy with how they turned out. They're about as good as someone like us can do free-handed, but you can actually also see that roughness I was talking about earlier really showing up on the cylinder saddle. That's not just the paint not laying on right, that was fundamentally there because I didn't sand it down after stripping it. My bad. So here's the Jupiter with all the lining except that on the cab done. This was right before I started doing decals, and I wanted to do the cab after the decals because I just thought that made a little more sense in terms of order of operations. But I also added some Tamiya copper paint to the piping because John Ott, who was my main resource for learning how painting sort of worked on the engine, has references of Schenectady locomotives with copper piping and without, and I just thought, you know what, if you look at it really closely, it looks like the Jupiter might have that copper piping, and I thought it just looked better anyway, so even if it doesn't, I like it. And here we have my custom decal sheet. I put 4 to a page just because it was pretty easy to mess up on them, and I actually ended up using all 4 of them. And you can also see on the top that I totally printed on the back of the first piece of decal stock. So here we have the model after decaling with another very astute observation from me a few months ago, and you can see how absolutely trash my desk is. Don't mind that. I have ADHD and I'm going to blame everything on that. And here we have the almost completed model. I finished it up with some all-clad aqua gloss, which is probably my new favorite gloss top coat now. And I still have problems with the black edges on the wheel tires chipping, which whenever a little bit more chips off, I just take a pointed file, I scrape it, and then I replace the original acrylic paint with some of that all-clad gloss black. And eventually all the acrylic will have chipped off and it'll all have been replaced by the all-clad gloss black. And then finally, we have the model as it stands today. I finished it by getting that LED installed and putting some microscale micro gloss in all of the glass surfaces. So this is how it appeared in that Reddit post and how it more or less appears today with the addition of the back head, which I didn't bother showing because it's just there to make sure you don't see the back of the motor. Anyway, thanks for joining me on this. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about how I created my Jupiter. See you guys in the next video.